Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 17 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the New England Patriots. How apropos, Patriots, given the events of this week, the events of today. The Patriots are a team that was undoubtedly a bottom 5 team last year and got incredibly aggressive with their offseason process, getting Mike Vrabel as their head coach, Josh McDaniels as their offensive coordinator, going back to the roots of the New England Patriots dynasty years, getting all these great minds together under one roof to build around a quarterback, and that quarterback is Drake May, the rookie who showed some signs of life last year, who showed that he quite possibly could be a franchise quarterback. There's a lot of smoothing out of those edges, the rough around the edges, Drake May, which was expected early on, and we'll see how that works out. They did add Stephon Diggs, try to get a veteran presence in there. They drafted some weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Kyle Williams, the wide receiver, Travion Henderson, the running back. They also went and got their left tackle, Will Campbell from LSU. There's some concerns about him. We'll get to that. And then Vrabel's defense. Harold Landry is coming in. Milton Williams is coming in to an already really good group. As of right now, Christian Wilkins hasn't signed after being cut by the Raiders, but apparently that's a destination that he is strongly considering, and we'll get to why that makes sense a little bit later. They added Robert Spillane at linebacker. He's their Mike linebacker now. They added Carlton Davis in the secondary. They did everything they could to be a better team than they were last year. They kind of have stopped settling for not being great, which for this generation of Patriots fan, not being great is definitely a new feeling. You know, you were a dynasty for 20 years. You had the greatest coach and the greatest quarterback. And now you're rebuilding that. And I think you did a good job. And we start that rebuild, of course, by getting the right minds in the building, like I said earlier. And it starts with the coaching staff. And it's them going out and getting Mike Vrabel to be the head coach. Even with the year off, he's still the 13th ranked head coach. Gets an 87 grade. I think that he was just fired because I feel like there was just nothing more he could accomplish in Tennessee. It kind of reminded me of when Andy Reid got fired from the Eagles. It wasn't because he was a bad coach. It wasn't because there wasn't a resume of success and great talent and great ability as a coach there. It's just because sometimes you just sort of peak and you need a change of scenery. And I think Tennessee decided, okay, maybe we got to take 2 steps back to take a couple steps forward, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then Vrabel takes a year off. He kind of consults a little bit around the league. You know, it takes on like that kind of a role. And then here he was in the role that I think a lot of people expected him to get anyway when he became a free agent head coach, which is the Patriots head coach. But there was the whole thing with Gerard Mayo where it was promised to him, and I don't think they necessarily expected Vrabel to become available. I think that was a shock to a lot of people. So then Mayo got a short leash. They weren't very good. They didn't show improvement last year, so it was really easy to get rid of him and to bring in Vrabel. It's not like Mayo made it difficult by maybe overachieving a little bit by having this overly explosive team that was playing super motivated. They just didn't look that way, and I think bringing in Vrabel, it automatically just changes things up. I think him bringing up Terrell Williams, even though Terrell Williams is my last ranked defensive coordinator, it's a deceiving ranking in that I get Terrell Williams has been associated with Vrabel in the past. He's done some work at like the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and all that. So he's an asset for sure. But he's also really just only kind of been a defensive line coach for 99% of his coaching career. And I think now coming up and being a defensive coordinator on a team where he's not really the defensive coordinator, I just feel like he's just another body, sort of just maintaining a defensive line coach. The defensive staff is just, it's kind of uninspiring as a defensive staff, to be honest, outside of Mike Vrabel. I mean, freaking Ben McAdoo is a defensive analysis, which, you know, having an offensive guy be your defensive analyst, I guess, has its benefits. But it's still just very, it's not a defensive staff where I go, this is going to elevate the talent that they have, other than Mike Vrabel and culture building, but that's from a head coaching perspective. From an offensive perspective, him bringing along Josh McDaniels, this is like Avengers Unite or Assemble. Avengers Assemble. I'm not a comic book nerd. Sorry, guys. But Josh McDaniels, he comes in, to me, he enters the 6th best offensive coordinator, just outside the top 5. Because say what you want about Josh McDaniels is what he's accomplished or didn't accomplish as a head coach in Denver and with the Raiders. As an offensive coordinator, the guy's been virtually unstoppable and undeniable. He puts together great offensive schemes, and when he's able to just focus on that, he's been fantastic at it. And I think this is where he's sort of going to settle in now for the rest of his coaching career. I don't think he's going to be somebody they hunt down for head coaching positions, and this is a rare space for a team in the modern NFL to be in, where you have a great offensive coordinator that you don't necessarily sit there and have the fear of losing to a head coaching position. I think there's so many other offensive minds that they're going to go after that aren't him. So he's going to have time to sit here. He's going to be able to build this relationship like he did with Tom Brady for all those years. He's going to be able to build this relationship with Drake May and get Drake May to the next level. They have Doug Marrone as their offensive line coach. I think those two combined together, it's going to be extremely beneficial for what they've invested in the most recent years in the draft. I think being able to say that you have this young ascending quarterback was very appealing, probably for Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. And then to go out and get Will Campbell, the left tackle, out of LSU, that's another thing where it's them truly putting an investment in that, because Belichick built a great defense, all things considered. Even when Brady left, the defense was never really the issue with this team. So I think this is more about, you bring in Vrabel, he sort of continues what Belichick had built defensively, and then worry about maintaining the Patriot culture that helps elevate everyone, keep everyone motivated, gets everyone working hard. You know, it's not going to be that notoriously fun place to play. And between Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, it's basically old school Patriots. You know, with a little bit of a spin on it, I guess. You know, Vrabel does use a lot of those multiple fronts. He'll have those 6-1 defenses that you see Belichick run in the past. He's going to be 3 safety usages. There's going to be guys playing all over the place. Kyle Duggar will play linebacker, I'm sure. Be interesting to see how they roll out some of the edge rushers, how they play them, where they position them, what situations they roll them out. But Vrabel's so creative as a defensive coach that I think he can elevate what is an uninspiring defensive staff, like we saw him do in Tennessee, and that we've seen him do when he was, you know, not a head coach, and he elevated people around him. He was just fantastic at doing that, and it's a great hire. And Josh McDaniels being able to build quarterbacks, being able to build a strong offensive scheme, how he's going to use some of these players in the offense that we're going to get to when we get to like the weapons, for example. They got Kyle Williams. They have Demario Douglas. They got the 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, I think are both going to be very effective. They got that running back group with Travion Henderson, who you saw when Josh McDaniels was an offensive coordinator that there was a lot of success for guys like Shane Vereen, like James White, Danny Woodhead. You get those shifty, really good receiving backs, you know, get these little athletes, you know, high agility, get the ball in space, get the ball to them quickly. He knows how to utilize these guys, and he's got all the pieces to the puzzle here that can really make this offense truly more effective than maybe people were expecting to happen so quickly, I would say. But I think this is a perfect situation for a young quarterback, for an ascending team that sort of had to unfortunately enter a rebuild after losing the greatest player of all time from their roster after having him for 20 years, and losing arguably the best coach of all time after having him for 20 plus years as well. So it's a good little building block place. As you can see, I'm really high on what this coaching staff can do for this team overall, elevating them from being a bottom 5 team last year to basically the middle of the league here. It's really exciting. I think that amongst the members of this coaching staff, again, it's a genius coaching staff, because even from a positional coach perspective, there's not a lot of guys here that I really foresee getting poached, at least early on here. So it's a staff that's going to be able to stay together, stick together, and build together, and that level of consistency is going to be just perfect for a lot of these young players who are now trying to learn the league. You don't have to keep learning over and over again. You see, that's a huge problem you get with a lot of young players, is they're constantly in positions where they have so much overturn from their coordinator and from their position coaches. This staff is not in the position where that is necessarily even on the horizon, barring like miracle work from a wide receivers coach or a running backs coach or the quarterbacks coach, which is just, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be there, but it doesn't take away from how well this coaching staff is going to be able to perform, and I think will perform. Jumping in here for an ad break, but still don't have them. So what I need from you guys is to thumbs up this video to push it out to more people. And then maybe the ads people will start contacting me about wanting to give me money. And until then, let's get back to the player grades. So there is no denying this is Drake May's team, the second-year quarterback. He comes in, gets an 82 grade that's tied for 22nd, 22nd, 23rd. Because he's such a wild card of a player, he always was going to be a work in progress. And the fact that he played at all last year was just a sign of how incredibly terrible this team was, how incredibly just desperate the coaching staff was as well. Because you get to Drake May, and he is really this ultimate like hot and cold type of a player. When he made some big time throws, but he also made a lot of turnover worthy plays. Like it was a gunslinger mentality. It was he did panic coming off of his first reads kind of often, more often than you'd like, but still a young quarterback situation. He wasn't afraid to use his legs. And in this kind of an offense, it's going to be something where he's going to be expected to execute from the pocket. And he does have the ability to do that when he's kept clean, when he has the time to do it. He can do the job. He's not one of these quarterbacks who just is incapable of doing the job, even when he's given ample amounts of time, or even average amount of time that an NFL quarterback gets. When he's pressured, he again, like I said, he does kind of panic. His eyes will drop, and if he doesn't have that clear lane to escape, then he gets into a lot of trouble. He could be making some mistakes where a lot of these turnover-worthy plays come from. Against the blitz, he was kind of average, but not bad considering he's this rookie quarterback who wasn't ready to play, who nobody thought would be ready to play. You also got the play action game, which he was not as good as you would hope, but you want to see improvements in the run game as well to sort of make people respect it a lot more. I think that teams were really kind of just allowing the run game to come to them, knowing that they wanted to pick on him a little bit. So the linebackers would kind of hold up. They wouldn't commit as much to the run, which can help the run game. But, if you're falling behind and you can't really push the ball on the field, you can only run the ball so much when you don't have a superstar running back or this great offensive line. He did really well in the short areas, I would say. That was his best area, was, executing with the tight end, throwing the screen passes, the quick drags, all that. Deep ball and the intermediate, that's where the improvement needs to come. And that comes from, studying in the film room. That comes from, working on what your pre-snap reads are, working on your post-snap reads, understanding the playbook, understanding player tendencies that your receivers have, where they're going to be, getting that chemistry built with them, and then making smart decisions as to which is the best place to go with the ball in those deep and intermediate areas. He's got all the tools. He doesn't have these glaring deficiencies in his game in terms of you don't go, oh, he can't throw an accurate ball to all three levels. He can. He's not a great athlete. He's a great athlete. He can't improvise. He definitely can. That's why he goes third overall in the draft, even though there was no expectation of him playing early on, because all those tangibles, you're kind of just got to smooth them out. And in the modern NFL, unfortunately, the expectations on young quarterbacks is the leashes are shorter and shorter, which I think is generally just kind of unfair. Because I think when you give guys the time to develop, you see great things out of them. When guys sit for a full year and then come out and play the next season, you see the great success that they can have. You saw it with Carson Palmer. You saw it with Patrick Mahomes. On and on and on you can go down the list of those guys. But then, you have, unfortunately, Jaden Daniels, who comes in the same draft class. And now the expectations of the fan bases who took quarterbacks in that class is you're going to have to perform really well. Even for like a team like Denver who got Bo Nix, who played great. You have this over-the-top expectation now. Well, why isn't our guy doing that? Why isn't he playing that well? Why isn't he just coming out and being an absolute superstar player every single snap? Why is it only sometimes that he looks great? Why am I only getting excited a little bit? To temper your expectations here, for Drake May to come in as the 22nd, 23rd-ish quarterback to start the year, understand that this is always about what a building block season for this team. It's not a win-now team. And I know that that's tough for a lot of fans in this organization, especially a lot of younger fans, because all you've known is success. All you've known is winning and winning big. This is the time where you watch this team build throughout the season. I think you're going to be very impressed with where they end up if they can stay healthy, because Drake May is going to be in a very quarterback-friendly offense here. They're going to be able to appeal to his skills. He's got a bunch of weapons that he can get the ball to them fast and make him look good, help build up his confidence to then be able to make bigger plays down the field. It's just a matter of how quickly he adapts to the mental aspect of the game, which is the one thing that he needed, which is why he needed the time to learn, and which is why he went 3rd overall rather than 2nd overall or 1st overall, because he was seen between the three as the least ready to play right away. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see a better and better quarterback, though, because you kind of saw that when he was playing in his rookie year. You kind of saw him start to get it in certain situations that he wasn't getting it maybe early on. You saw him get better throughout games. And it's just a matter of having a stable offensive coordinator, a stable offensive staff, a stable offensive scheme and strategy week to week to help keep him on the right path. And this is the perfect situation for him. I'm really, really excited for what Drake May will be able to bring to this team throughout the season, especially towards the end of it, if this weapons group stays healthy. Because for me, this weapons group comes in just about in the middle of the league, 14th or 15th. You take your pick. Tied for 14th. It starts with the addition of Stefon Diggs, who comes in, and he's coming in wide receiver 1, and I know that there was a lot of people that were like, he's washed. He's, coming off of a brutal injury in Houston. Why should there be high expectations of him? Well, I look at Stefon Diggs and I look at what he was doing in Houston. The sample size that he gave. And I was like, he doesn't look like he's lost a step. It really doesn't look like it. Maybe a quarter of a step. Now with the injury coming back from it, maybe this is the time he has lost a step, but Stefon Diggs was an elite level wide receiver who did everything, did so many things, and he still was out there with speed. He was still out there creating space. I thought he was doing really well, all things considered. And just to go down with that injury is very brutal, obviously. You never want to see that happen, but I think from a veteran presence coming in, being a number 1 receiver, as long as he takes it seriously, there are the things going around that he's not taking it seriously, and it's could reflect poorly on him and his performance this year. It certainly can. I'm not denying that that's a possibility. But I think just as someone who can help, because you want a consistent veteran presence at the wide receiver position for your young quarterback. And I think in this culture in particular, he's not going to be able to sort of run roughshod all over the locker room. And, I know that there's this thing about him being this personality that is not good for a locker room, and which is why he's on his 4th team. And I don't really buy it all the way. Buy it to a little bit, but I think for what is going to be asked of him, considering how Josh McDaniels operates an offensive scheme, I think he fits in really well, and he's going to be able to really contribute to this group. Then you get Demario Douglas, who has been really good since coming into the league, and he's going to take up the slot wide receiver role here. And just to give you guys who don't remember Josh McDaniels' history as an offensive coordinator, especially in New England, the slot receiver was an absolute beast every single year. Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, the resume speaks for itself. He knows how to use these slot wide receivers. He knows how to get them the football. He knows how to scheme them up to get them open. He allows them to be creative. There's a lot of option routes involved here, so we'll see how Demario Douglas's football IQ can apply. But the sky is the limit for this guy, and he executes really well in the short to intermediate, and that's where we're going to see a lot of the Josh McDaniels slot receivers happen, because he's a better athlete, Demario Douglas. He's, faster and shiftier than you get out of, Wes Welker or Julian Edelman and those types. But he's still going to, so he's going to take that role that these lesser athletes, these slower guys were taking, and he's going to be able to apply his athleticism to it. I think it's going to create some really great opportunities in those short to intermediate areas where he's thrived in the past. He's also a very sure-handed player. He only had one drop last year, 1.5% drop percentage. Didn't really have a lot of contested catches. That's not really what he's going to do. Now, the Josh McDaniels slot receivers have always been a little bit more physical. We'll see how much that changes with Demario Douglas, or if he just adds a physicality to his game. He did have 370 yards after the catch with 621 total yards. His catches, 66 to 84 targets. I expect that to go up significantly. I expect him to be a 100 target guy at least. I expect him to be at least 75 catches this year, and I expect him to be really close to that 800 yard mark, 850 maybe, and then at least 5-6 touchdowns. Because the ball is going to get spread around. There is going to be very specific packages to get the ball into the hands of certain players. And one of those players is going to be the rookie Kyle Williams, who this regime drafted, who is the outside wide receiver, who is going to be the deep threat here, who executed really well as a deep threat. He was a great contested catch guy. He had 10 contested catches successfully made for 62.5%. He did have 5 drops, which you want to clean that up coming in. That's not necessarily a feature you want in one of the outside wide receivers, but he had 14 touchdowns. He had nose for the end zone, almost 1,200 yards. If you can clean up the drops, he's coming in, him and Demario Douglas are coming in to be in a situation where they could really end up being a great 1-2 punch, because I still feel like Stephon Diggs will be the one to demand these double teams from the corners, at least especially early in the season. I think as the season goes on, if Kyle Williams starts to really explode as an outside wide receiver, then maybe they'll start rolling coverage over to him. But these first 4, 5, 6 games of the year, it's going to be the Kyle Williams show. Now, there is competition out there for him. Some pretty stiff competition from some guys who have been around a bit, like Mac Hollins, who they just brought in, and Kendrick Bourne, who's been there for a while. And then some of the younger guys as well, like Kayshon Boutte, like Javon Baker, and Jalen Polk, who are all going to be competing for snaps here. And I think having that depth at wide receiver, Josh McDaniels, again, notorious for allowing huge opportunities for these guys who don't come into the league with this high-level pedigree, so to speak, or who have had these doubts or had these down seasons or haven't necessarily lived up to expectations elsewhere. He's open to giving these guys opportunities because he trusts his system. So it's not guaranteed that Kyle Williams, just because they drafted him, is necessarily going to be the guy who gets the third most amount of snaps or the second most amount of snaps at wide receiver. If Boutte or Bourne or Baker or Polk or Hollins, if they start performing, they'll ride the hot hand. So there is a little bit of pressure there on Kyle Williams, but I do think that he's the best one coming into the season out of that entire group. And from my perspective, should, by the end of the year, be at the very least wide receiver 3 on the stat book. Then you look at Travion Henderson, the rookie coming out of Ohio State, another guy that this regime is bringing in specifically, and he's going to be the guy that's going to be taking up these snaps here, these receiving snaps, these third down running back snaps. It's going to be a majority of what he does, I think, here in his rookie year. I talked a little bit about James White and Shane Vereen and those guys who did really, really well. Danny Woodhead. Look for him to fill that role. You'll see Demario Douglas fill that slot receiver role once held by Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and, Amendola and Chris Hogan and all those guys. You're going to see Travion Henderson take on that role of that running back who executes in the passing game, gets those screen passes, gets those sneaky when they spread them all out and then they'll hand the ball off. Travion Henderson, will get to his running back ability shortly. He's going to take on that position. Then you get to the tight ends, and everyone remembers Gronk and Hernandez and how great that 1-2 punch was at the tight end position. They actually have the ability here to some degree, to a lesser degree, but still to an effective degree, recreate that with running a lot of the 12 personnel they're going to be able to run here with Hooper and with Hunter Henry, who just last year had 66 catches, 674, only one drop. He had 11 contested catches, and he was great at all levels as a receiving tight end. He did play majority of the slot, which, when they spread him out, they'll look for matchup issues there, but I do expect him to play more inline tight end. I do expect, let's say I expect the slot percentage and the inline percentage to be flipped at this time next season. And then I think there's a situation also, though, where he plays more of like an H-back role. When Austin Hooper's out there on the field, they're more in 12 personnel, and he's going to be doing some motions and sneaking out into the flats and on those play-action boots. And I would watch for him in the red zone. I think this is going to be the guy they're going to look to in the red zone. He only had 2 touchdowns last year, but I feel like he was underutilized in that sense. Obviously, last season, I don't expect Josh McDaniels to not utilize him in that way in this offense this time around. So, from an overall sense, this wide receiver group, somebody in here is potentially going to have like either a career year or, in Stephon Diggs' case, a career renaissance. Somebody here, it's going to have it. The offensive scheme is just too well-rounded, it's too experienced, and it's too perfected by the play caller that it's impossible for there not to be at least something to come out of it. I would be incredibly shocked if there wasn't somebody on this team who just blasted away, whether it's Hunter Henry getting double-digit touchdowns, whether it's Demario Douglas having over 100 catches. It's going to be something like that that's going to come out of this group. Now, even when you get to the running backs here, you have Ramondre Stevenson and you have Travion Henderson, who are much more similar as players I think people give credit for. When Ramondre Stevenson came out of Oklahoma, I think he was looked at as much more of a bigger back who could do some stuff in the receiving game. But I feel like he's starting in a huge way to fall out of favor, and I think you look at the bottom of the screen there, the 7 fumbles. That is something that, especially with Vrabel coming in as the head coach, especially with McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, that is not going to be acceptable. Here's the thing, he won't have 7 fumbles this season. He won't be anywhere close to that, because if he fumbles once, then he's going to be on the bench for a long time. He's going to be on the bench until every other running back in that running back room fumbles themselves. And then he'll get back in the rotation, because that's how they run. You don't make mistakes like that. You don't give the ball away to the other team when you're on the offensive side of the ball. You don't fumble the ball. Ever. So that's something that's going to be drastically different about his stat line. Now, his missed tackles forced are okay. You'd like them to be a lot higher for someone who had 200 carries and has his skill set and his workload. He had less than 4.4 yards a carry, which you can also blame that on the O-line a little bit, but his yards after contact, 601. So most of his yards, third of his yards came with no contact. So most of what he was getting was he was making guys miss behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage and then getting a couple extra yards there. You hope that changes with some of the offensive line adjustments that they made. However, they do have Antonio Gibson on the bench, and they did draft Travion Henderson, who, like I said during talking about the receiving weapons, he's going to be on the field for that. That's going to be really, I think, what his role on this team is going to be. The 0 fumbles is a complete contrast to what they had with Ramondre Stevenson, and I think that was very calculated to be honest. When I saw that, I was like, this makes all the sense in the world as to why he was the one they went after. When you look at a guy who has fumbleitis versus a guy who doesn't put the ball on the ground at all, night and day. You get the sure thing. Now, famous last words. you have a running back who never fumbles ever, and then he gets to the NFL and he fumbles right away. See it all the time. The mental toughness that has to come with having those types of situations will be probably the true test. Because I'm not saying Travion Henderson's never going to fumble the ball. It's a matter of how he's going to bounce back from the first one. 7 yards a carry at Ohio State last year. Over 1,000 yards. On 141 carries. 10 touchdowns, 21 explosive runs, 44 first downs, 37 missed tackles forced, 643 yards after contact. He's doing all these things that this offense loves out of running backs, and then his ability in the receiving game is going to be able to take him to the next level here. Sneaky great season, I think, under wraps here. I don't think he gets it all rushing. I think a lot of it, he'll be like 55 to 60% of his yards will probably be rushing, and then the other 40 to 45 will be in the receiving game. But I still think if he gets 1,000 total yards of offensive production between rushing and receiving, I don't think that's off the table, because they are going to use him the way they used James White in the past, for example. So he's going to get running opportunities. They are going to spread him out wide, and then he's going to be given the ball on his own run and be expected to hit a hole, and he makes a linebacker miss. It's open field, and he hits the open field. He's a menace. He really is a menace. I think him being in like this mixed backfield with Quinshon Judkins kind of made his skill set get lost a little bit. But I think the fact that he still went high in the draft, at least high for a running back's perspective, says a lot about what teams saw in his ability, especially the Patriots. And when they have these certain mentalities, the certain culture that we know that they're going to have here, he's going to get these opportunities, and they picked him out for a specific reason. It's not just his ability, it's his character as well. And I think that also goes back to the fumbles thing, where I think they trust his character, and they really probably broke him down during that interview process. So I'm really excited for what Travion Henderson can bring to this offense. Antonio Gibson, probably the best running back 3 in the league right now. I've never really been that high on Antonio Gibson. I've always kind of felt he was a little bit overrated, but I think in this position, this is a great spot for this running back room. He's a great guy for this running back room to have in this situation, because I think he can come in and he can fill in for either one of these guys' roles, whether it be an early down back or whether it be a third down receiving back. I think you can have packages for him where you split him out, where manufacture touches for him, and let him use his running back abilities out in space in the receiving game. There's a lot of open opportunities here for him. There's just not a lot of high end talent in the running back room. It's not Saquon Barkley, it's not Derrick Henry, it's not even who, like Joe Mixon, whoever. It's going to be a running back by committee group. And it's going to be people playing very specific roles in this offense. And it's advantageous to have your third running back be able to take the mantle for either one of the backs. If they get injured, or, Stevenson's case, fumbles too much, you're able to replace that workload with somebody who's at least capable of handling it in the context of the overall offense. Now, this is the ultimate wild card group here. This is what's going to really drive the offense one way or the other. It's the offensive line. And you can see by the rankings here, I like the pass blocking to a degree, tied for 14th. They're kind of just like the weapons room here. But the run blocking is a real concern for me. They are 28th. Outside of Garrett Bradbury, they don't have a player on this offensive line that I'm particularly super excited about for their run blocking ability. Even in the depth, there's some good depth pieces in terms of the pass blocking, but it all really starts with the number 4 overall pick, Will Campbell, who is going to start left tackle despite a lot of the concerns about size and length. He is, in terms of length, I think the shortest arms out of any of the starting tackles in the league coming in, which that's a red flag. We'll talk about the measurables aren't taken way too seriously. It's about from a foundational standpoint, footwork and all that, he's solid, which is why he still gets an 81 grade. My concern is that teams are going to take their lengthiest edge rusher, and he's not going to be able to get his hands on them. They're going to be able to bat his hands away. They're going to be able to make moves with distance and be able to use that length and really just kind of leave him helpless. I think in the run game that's going to be a real issue as well. I think in the pass game, you saw him take 9 penalties on 558 snaps, give up 18 pressures, 11 quarterback hurries. There is something to that where he has to resort to certain tactics that aren't necessarily the best for him. Now, I think he's so fundamentally sound that you put him at left tackle just because, he has this upside to him from the fundamental perspective, and you think you can coach into him the ability to be a top tackle. You think he has the right mentality, which from what he did after he was drafted, how do you not love him as a player, and how do you not just know that he's going to be a great player? It's just a matter of where he's going to be a great player. I think worst case scenario, he's going to move to guard, and you got a new Zach Martin type of a guard, because Zach Martin played tackle, moved to guard right away. Will Campbell's coming in. I think from a pass blocking perspective, you're just hoping. I'm sure they're going to help him out. I'm sure that's where the chips are going to come, because teams are going to attack him. I think just from a mentality standpoint, though, you got a decent floor here with Will Campbell. Now in the run game, it's a different story. He's coming in. He's not going to play great gap run blocking. He didn't do it at LSU when called upon. As a zone blocking, pretty good. Again, the length is a huge concern. Him getting out there and getting his hands on these guys, on these defensive linemen who, especially the veteran types who, know how to use length, know how to use space, know how to create it. It's going to be a lot harder for him. So we'll see how he responds to it. We'll see how they adjust their scheme and adjust where they run and how they run to sort of suit what Will Campbell's going to be able to contribute, because no matter how good fundamentally he is, no matter what you think he can be, you got to put him in positions to succeed. And he's a special type of player with very specific needs in order to achieve what you're hoping he can achieve. He's playing next to Cole Strange, who, when he's healthy, is a really good guard, good pass protection for a guard. But again, the run blocking, you just kind of he just doesn't perform at these high levels for run blocking. Opposite of him, you got Mike Owenu, who he reminds me a lot of Elton Jenkins, where in a sense of that he's never really achieved his full potential because he's never been allowed to settle into one position. He was a guard, then he was a tackle, then he was a guard again, then he was a tackle again. I think he played center for a game or two even at one point. You hope that he can just settle in at this right guard position, because guard is his best position, and that he can build something off of that, because he's really been just riding on his high floor of a player that he established when he came in as a rookie. He hasn't really improved from that time, from that rookie season where he just took the league by storm as a guard, which how much by storm can you take the league as a guard? But he still did. He just never really got to improve on that because they had to move him to tackle. Then they had to move him back to guard. Then they moved him to the left. Then he's back on the right. Consistency will be the key for him. And from a competition standpoint for these two guards, you got Tyrese Robinson and Layden Robinson, who I really liked Layden Robinson when he was in college. I don't necessarily think either one of these guards are in danger at all of losing their job. Now, if they think that Jared Wilson can step in a pinch, I think Jared Wilson, if you want to swing him out to guard, he could be something. I think he's a good pass blocker, and you don't really lose a whole lot in run blocking. Not like you can afford to lose anything in run blocking, really, but I think in terms of pass blocking, he would help maintain a certain level here for your group. Then you get to Garrett Bradbury, who is not being brought in as a pass blocker at all. He's being brought in because they were like, we are going to zone running. And that's what he did best. That's what he does best. It's probably the only good part of his game because I don't see him as a great pass blocker at all. We'll see, thankfully he's a center. And he's basically going to be working off of double teams, sliding to a double team with either one of his guards. Just watching for those inside A-gap stunts. But it's to make the running game better. That's why Garrett Bradbury was brought here. And I don't know how much of a long-term answer it is because they did bring in Jared Wilson. I think that maybe from a long-term perspective, the idea is Bradbury plays for a year or two. Jared Wilson develops some running game skills in the background, and in the meantime is just your fourth interior offensive lineman, like a guy, like a replacement level guy in case of an injury or whatever, until eventually he's ready to start when Bradbury's contract is up or whatever. Maybe extend Bradbury an extra year. Who knows? They also brought in Morgan Moses, the veteran, to play right tackle. He's, again, this high floor player who is just a good veteran presence to have. He's notoriously been he's just been solid his whole career, and for some reason it's just not been good enough for a lot of teams. So you hope that he can just stick around and he can stay healthy, and if he does, then you don't really necessarily have to worry all that much. He's not going to be he's not going to blow you away. There's really no one on this offensive line who's going to blow you away this season. But what you want is just a group that maintains a high floor to protect the quarterback and to allow the quarterback to grow. That's really the goal here, this offensive line. Obviously, you want Will Campbell to grow. You'd like Cole Strange and Michael Winu, some of these younger guys, to obviously take a step up in their game. Will Campbell to develop. But from Bradbury's perspective, from Morgan Moses' perspective, from like Vidarian Lowe and these depth players on the offensive line, the goal is don't make big mistakes that damage what you're trying to build from a quarterback perspective with Drake May. And I think from a pass blocking perspective, they're in good shape. I do worry again about the run blocking and the kind of pressure it's going to put on their running backs to make big plays, and then that's when you get turnovers, and we know Ramondre Stevenson, turnover issues. So you want to see Bradbury, and maybe the move to the zone blocking will improve the overall offensive line performance and run blocking to keep the run game at least at a level where you can turn to it, and it's not going to be a detriment to you late in games or in certain points and drives when you want to shorten the game up. Maybe you want to play a little bit faster. You want the offensive line to be able to perform at least to make the run game somewhat effective, to at least make opposing defenses respected enough so you can work an effective play action game. You love those plays where it's a play action screen pass to the slot and you get like the center and the guard sprinting out there to create like the tunnel screen. I think between Bradbury, Owenu, and Cole Strange, they could pull that off. So I'd look for a lot of that to happen as well this year. And maybe use the pass game as an extension of the run game, the way McDaniels has so effectively in the past, to help out this offensive line, maybe achieve a little bit of a higher floor and trick people into maybe thinking they're better run blockers than they actually are. Overall, it is my 23rd ranked offense, 21st pass offense, 26th rush offense. But again, the coaching staff is so strong, they'll be able to figure out ways to at least be effective on the offensive side of the ball and scheme up something that's going to be at least something opposing defenses are going to have to respect week to week. Now moving on to the undoubtedly the strength of this team, the defensive side of the ball. This is Mike Vrabel's bread and butter. This is where Terrell Williams is going to get an opportunity to really grow his portfolio after just being a defensive line coach, like we said earlier. And speaking of defensive line, he's acquiring one of the best in the entire league here, starting with, despite criticisms of his game, Harold Landry, I do think comes into this season as the most well-rounded edge player, and he's your three-down edge guy for me. I think his relationship with Vrabel, and I think Vrabel purposely bringing him in, it's because he had very specific goals for this group, and I think it was to have Harold Landry kind of just be the solid anchor of this group. Now, he's coming off of what could very easily be depicted as a down season. He had 9 sacks, but we talked about this with other players like Travon Walker in Jacksonville or whatever. That doesn't tell the whole story because he only had a total of 30 pressures, a 114th in win percentage. That is, I think there was only like 117 eligible players in this ranking, and he was 114th. So the 80 grade, is it generous? Yes. But it's generous because he's going back to a system that allowed him to get the big contract extension that he got when he was in Tennessee. And that's because of Vrabel. And because Vrabel knows how to use him. And I think when you have a head coach that knows how to use a certain player and they get reunited, to me, and it's just me, you have to, I think, grade accordingly. If he was still in Tennessee, I'd be like, Tennessee has no idea what to do with him. They don't put him in situations to succeed. They don't do any of that. Why should I have high expectations of him in either aspect of his game? Because even in the run game, he was 30th in stops, so he was at least a asset in that sense. But he can be an even bigger asset coming out this season. Now, they do have such a deep rotation here that he's going to be competing with a lot of guys for playing time. But I do think out of all the edge guys, he will have the highest snap count by the end of the year. And I think having such a deep room is incredibly beneficial for him as well, because now he doesn't have to just come out and play every single down. On these early downs, there's Anthony Jennings, who's one of the best run defending edge players, outside linebackers in the entire league. Doesn't deliver a whole lot in passing situations, but he comes in those running situations. That's a good time for Harold Landry to maybe take a breather. And then you move on to Keon White, who's the opposite of what you get from Anthony Jennings. He's a little bit of a bigger player, so he can play maybe some 3-4 defensive end in some base formations, and Vrabel loves to throw a bunch of different fronts, a bunch of different mixes. He'll have a 5-man front one week. He'll have a 6-man front one week. Some week it'll just be 4. Some of the times it'll be 3. He'll mix it up according to what his opponent is going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And they did everything they could to add to this group in a way where he's going to be able to roll out all these different looks very effectively. When you got a guy like Keon White, you can do that. But then you got a guy like Kayvon Chason, who can plug in when you want to play maybe a little bit faster. They drafted Braden Swinson, who is just a pass rusher. Just a pass rusher coming in. But what an asset to have that he's coming in. He was one of the better pass rushers, just pure pass rush guys coming into the draft. What causes a guy like him to fall is that he can't play those early downs. He can't play those big situations where he has to get a stop in the run game. But on this team, the expectation of him is going to go in there and get after the quarterback. Right? Like, I think he brings as much as Chason and Harold Landry are bringing to this team in terms of that ability. I think Chason's a little better than him in the run game. I think Harold Landry's better than both of them in the run game, hence the grades that they get. You move on into the interior of the offensive line, and Christian Barmore approved to come back to the league after some blood clot issues. From a pass rushing perspective, again, great interior pass rusher. In run defense, I feel like he's going to be part more of a rotation. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because Jeremiah Farms is going to be the guy to get snaps in the run game. He'll be the rotational guy in that scenario. They got Joshua Farmer, who could probably sneak his way into some stats. Tonga getting some nose tackle snaps. There's much more depth concerns here with this group. But having the ability to kick Keon White into more of an interior role in certain situations is advantageous. But then Milton Williams is the guy they broke the bank for, coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles after just an amazing career season. He had 8 sacks. He was 4th in pass rush win percentage among eligible interior defensive linemen. And that's where you make all your money. Right there. Barmore will be your A-gap 1 tech. And this is your 3 tech. This is your 3 tech, your 4-eye tech throughout the whole season. And he's just going to go after the quarterback. he's the better player coming in with Barmore, especially because Barmore's health concerns. So I do expect him to get the majority of the snaps out of everyone that's in this group that's considered defensive line. If he stays healthy, it'll be the most snaps he'll ever had in his career. And I think that has also opened up the opportunity to potentially expose him as not being as good as people think. Because the one thing that Milton Williams gets the benefit of is that he was in a very crowded, very talented interior defensive line room where they were able to pick their spots with him very, very closely. You had Jordan Davis, you had Jalen Carter, you had Moro Ajamo in there. It's a really good room he's coming from in Philadelphia from an interior defensive line perspective. So he was always able to operate fresh, and he was always in the situation that was best suited for him. Here, I think in New England, it's going to be less of that because, again, the only person that's really going to be able to effectively be part of a rotation here is Jeremiah Farms from a true interior defensive line perspective. In pass rushing situations, I think that's when you might see Keon White bump inside. And then you'll get a situation where it'll be Harold Landry, Milton Williams, Keon White, and then Caleb on Chase on the field at the same time as your 4-man pass rush. Or if you want to put together a 5-man pass rush, you'll see Barmore out there as well in that scenario. My concern is that Milton Williams is just another one of those interior defensive linemen who's a one-year wonder. Because he was a decent rotational guy going into last season, but he wasn't what he got paid to be and what this competition between the Patriots and the Panthers were. So, I have to respect what he did last year and be like, it just clicked for him, and he's coming into a situation where he's going to be coached well, and he's going to be put into a lot of similar situations. But I think from a run perspective, he's going to be put in more situations where he's not going to be able to be as effective because he wasn't a great run defender. Overall, it doesn't drop them by that significant of a margin. They're still tied for 6th in run defense in this group because they have so many great bodies that are part of this rotation. They're 3rd in overall pass rush. And there's another little caveat coming out here. We talked about it in the intro. And that is that there's, as of this recording, it's just rumors that Christian Wilkins is going to be brought in here. And if Christian Wilkins was brought in here, he is coming in as he'll be the 3rd best pass rusher, but he'll be the best run defender of all the interior defensive linemen in this group, which would raise the run defense into at least the top 5, maybe even top 4, top 3. So there is that little caveat here where if they do add Christian Wilkins, I will feel significantly better about the role that Milton Williams is going to be able to play. It's going to be much more, it'll turn his role into something much more similar to what he did in Philadelphia just last year, which I think is why the Patriots would even be in on Christian Wilkins despite having 2 guys who they know for sure are definitely starting caliber interior defensive linemen, and they have these hybrid type players like Keon White who they could kick in certain situations. So I would feel like that's the reason why they would be in on Wilkins at all. And that's why I think it's a really great idea. Now the linebackers, in terms of their run defense, 7th in the league. They're tied for 15th in coverage. They're smack dab in the middle for me, because Christian Ellis and Robert Spillane are your top 2 linebackers. You will see Jelani Tavai as well. Jelani Tavai had that huge peak as a linebacker where he was like, oh, he's one of the best in the league. Kind of came back down to earth recently. That's why they go out and get Robert Spillane, who had just an amazing season with the Raiders. He's the traditional, true green dot Mike linebacker, where in coverage, he's not great, but he's a linebacker. You get him for his run defense and 110 tackles, 47 assists, only 10 missed tackles, a 6% missed tackle rate. That's what you live for right here. And he can blitz really well. When he was called upon to blitz by the Raiders, he did it effectively. I would expect with this multiple front week to week changes that we see with the Vrabel style defense, he's going to be constantly put in these positions to succeed. You look at what Dante Hightower, you look at Gerard Mayo, and how they thrived in these types of defenses. He's coming in as the best linebacker I think Vrabel's had in years as a head coach. The linebacking group wasn't great in Tennessee. It overperformed like everyone else did, but they didn't have this type of pedigree coming in the way that he's getting with Spillane from a traditional linebacker perspective. And I think Vrabel, because of his history as a linebacker, he's going to be able to really, and what he saw them do with Mayo and with Dante Hightower, with Brandon Spikes, for example, I could see Robert Spillane filling in that role, that Patriot-style linebacker role, where, on the field all 3 downs, and then they'll just figure out a way to scheme up whoever's next to him, whether it be someone like Kyle Duggar or Jabril Peppers coming down, or hopefully more traditionally will be linebacker Christian Ellis, who, from a pass coverage perspective, gave up less than a 94 passer rating, only gave up 1 touchdown, only 156 yards, was targeted 18 times, gave up 13 catches on 18 targets. That's not bad. He had 10 pressures. In run defense, he was It's fine. It's fine. But in this type of defense that they're going to be bringing in, the one that Vrabel's mastered over the years, they're going to position him situationally where he's going to be able to use his skill set and maximize it to maximize his production. He's not going to be set up to fail. We'll say that. I don't know that he's going to be put in a lot of the big linebacker situations. I think they have the guys that are going to be able to play big in those scenarios. That's when you'll see, Jelani Tavai come in. You'll see Jack Gibbons come in those scenarios. They're not going to be afraid to put Christian Ellis in just mostly pass coverage situations where he's going to be able to thrive the most. Monty Rice, who I loved coming out, he was on the Titans. He sort of just, sort of hovers around there now with Vrabel as a familiar face. I don't know if he makes the team. I think Jack Gibbons, from a special teams perspective, will be out there, and Tavai as just a really solid third linebacker here. I think being able to rotate him in more running situations, his skill set, even though I don't think he's overall a better run defender than Christian Ellis even is, I think just from a difference in playing style that you'll see Jelani Tavai get probably more snaps than most other linebacker 3s will, because again, from week to week, they will make adjustments in their personnel and how many snaps they get. That's just how that defense operates. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if by the end of the year, depending on how they view their opponents and how their opponents, what they show them in the film room during the week, if Jelani Tavai maybe gets the second most linebacker snaps, even though to me he's clearly the third most talented. You see that all the time with the Vrabel defenses, the Belichick defenses. So that's something to watch. But then amongst this linebacker group, they will play the hot hand as well. It's kind of like the third wide receiver position, that second outside wide receiver role that you'll see in the offense. They'll play this hot hand. So Robert Spillane really starts to show up. You'll see him in every situation. If Christian Ellis really blows up, he'll be the guy that gets all the playing time. If someone else like Kyle Duggar comes down and starts playing really well at linebacker, you'll see Kyle Duggar play linebacker all year. It's just one of those defenses, so it's really difficult to plan against. Now, this defensive back group is really, really something to witness here. They have really good depth. They got a nice variety of skill sets, and it starts with their true cornerback one, the guy who leads the third best coverage group in the league. It's Christian Gonzalez. This guy, boy, do Washington fans must feel miserable taking Emmanuel Forbes over him. Boy, must it suck to be you. On 84 targets last year, he gave up 46 catches for less than 500 yards, 7 pass breakups, only 2 touchdowns allowed, a 70.5 passer rating allowed, only 3 penalties. Talk about being locked down, shut down. This guy is the real deal. In a league where they showed they're not afraid to give Defensive Player of the Year awards to corners when they gave it to Patrick Surtain last year.
Christian Gonzalez, especially with this new defensive scheme, we've seen Ty Law really excel in this. We've seen Asante Samuel. We've seen Malcolm Butler. We've seen all these guys who, by my estimation, in my opinion, from a pure skill set, don't have what Christian Gonzalez has. A- zone grade. He gets a B- in man. He's going to be a better zone player for sure. But in this multiple defense, it's going to be so hard to identify what he's even doing. And I think he's going to be able to pick apart opposing quarterbacks. He had a sneaky amount of slot snaps last year. 756 corner snaps, 212 slot snaps. Watch out for Christian Gonzalez, man. This guy is a mega star in the making. I think this is the year where he puts himself on the map with Patrick Surtain, with Trent McDuff, with those types of players. Jalen Ramsey sort of on the way down, Christian Gonzalez coming on the way up here. And his ability to travel around and cover the number one receiver, that's a huge asset to have, especially when you have Carlton Davis, who you just signed in free agency, on the other side. Now, there are injury concerns that come with Carlton Davis, but from a zone perspective, him and Christian, he's as good of a zone coverage guy as Christian Gonzalez is. Where he really loses out is in man coverage. He takes a lot of penalties, is a little too grabby. But, 87.9 passer rating when targeted. He's still a really good player. He's one of the better cornerback twos in the entire league coming into the season, after the expectations that he'd be cornerback one in Detroit. To come here and to have to now only worry about wide receiver 2 on the opposing team, it's raising the ship here. He had a pretty good targets to receptions ratio. You'd like to see it maybe get a little bit better, but again, he's just another pure outside corner for the most part. So the fact they've really got those two areas settled, you just hope that Carlton Davis can stay healthy to maintain what the peak of this secondary should be. Not that they don't have good depth at all, because Marcus Jones in the nickel, smaller player, but from a coverage standpoint, plays the nickel as well as anybody. And from an aggressive run perspective, he plays so much bigger than what he is. Considering his size, his aggressiveness in the run game, top notch. And because they're going to have so many multiple fronts, they're going to have guys allowed to have competition here. Miles Battle, Isaiah Bolton, Kobe Minor, just to name a few. They got a lot of guys listed in their cornerback depth charts. You guys should go check it out. And it is littered with bodies, and there's going to be opportunities given out everywhere. And then even in the safety room, where Jabril Peppers enters this, and he's, the best safety on the team. His personal life aside, his ability to play in the box, his ability to play traditional safety, he can play some slot, he can come up play some linebacker. These are all advantageous roles for him. He just needs to get his personal life under control. Because when he was targeted, 39.2 passer rating when he was targeted. That counts for something. Now, he plays roles where he's able to take advantage of offenses. He's not a traditional safety. He's not the deep third safety. It's hard to tell in this group who's going to take on that role. Kyle Duggar's going to get a lot of playing time because he's going to sort of be what Jabril Peppers is doing out there as well. I'm just not that high on Kyle Duggar. Personally, I think Marte Mapu, who's linebacker / safety / whatever, I just like him better for an upside perspective. But, for some reason, Kyle Duggar just sort of settles in and people really like him. And he kind of is just like Jeremy Chin to a degree, where people they love his versatility, the skill set of his versatility. And he'll play more linebacker, I think, than anything else this season, though he is mentioned amongst the safety groups as a starting safety. I think as the season goes on, he'll just play more linebacker because Mapu and Jalen Hawkins and rookie Craig Woodson and Del Pettis, who I love Del Pettis. I wish he would get more playing time. I think from a coverage perspective, I think he can shock a lot of people. And the excitement of Vrabel coming in, and some of these guys getting clean slates, and knowing that these guys who showed a lot in small sample sizes are definitely going to get opportunities to expand on that sample size. I think Del Pettis, he's the sleeper of this whole group, man. He really is. You heard it here first. Del Pettis is going to be the next. He'll by the end of the year, I'm calling it right now. I'm doing it. I'm getting bold. By the end of the year, he'll be the best safety on the team. And he'll be looked at as a top 20 safety in the league going into next season. I'm saying it. I'm calling it. I think he's so well-rounded. He's going to be put in great positions. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be. I'm calling it now. I'm putting my reputation on it. So overall, it is the 7th ranked defense. They have the best pass defense in the entire league. From a pass rush perspective, from a coverage perspective, they dominate in all facets. And even from a run defense perspective, the linebackers being so well-rounded in that sense, the defensive line having such depth, and the secondary at least having aggressiveness to them, fantastic. I worry about the defensive coaching staff to a degree, but I think that from an overall perspective, they're still the 7th ranked defense in the league for me. Now taking a look at their schedule, it's a pretty decent schedule here. They're 30th in strength of schedule. So they're going to have a chance here to pick at some teams. They get Tennessee, they get Cleveland, they get Atlanta, they get the Jets twice. They get Miami twice, obviously, in the division. The Baltimore and Buffalo games are the only ones that I look at and I go, they're not ready for that. But they get Carolina at home. They get the Giants at home. They catch Cincinnati on the road. They're catching New Orleans on the road, unfortunately. But they get Vegas at home as well. And Vegas, has those inconsistencies. They just lost Christian Wilkins. They might get Christian Wilkins right from the Raiders. So immediately they come in and he starts handing out all the defensive secrets first day. So they're going to be way ready for week 1. To me, when you have 4 guaranteed wins and your over under is 7.5, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other games on there that are like 50-50 games, there's no reason why this team shouldn't win 8. I think they will win 8. They might sneak 9. They might, depending on how quickly the offense comes together. But I think their defense is just too strong coming into this year, and there's too many teams they're playing that have question marks on the offensive side of the ball coming in, like Miami, like Pittsburgh, like Carolina, New Orleans, Tennessee, Cleveland, Cincinnati to a degree this late in the year. What's their offensive line going to look like? The Giants especially. It's a team, Cincinnati's defense is going to be so bad, I think, by the end of the year if they don't get Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart, that could easily be a green game because they're not going to have anybody out there to stop anything. And the defense is going to match up at least really well against the offense to be able to at least slow them down a bit to outscore them. So, yeah, I'm smash the over. So this is my 17th ranked team. 23rd offense, 7th defense, 13th ranked head coach. Right smack dab in the middle. But things are trending up and trending up fast for you Patriot fans. And I'm not saying you're going to be back to multiple dynasties back to back to back. But you're approaching playoff caliber quickly with just this one-off season of moves. Very impressive.
And there it is, my number 17 team, the New England Patriots. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And like a good Patriot, like a real American, like being American made, shout out to the American made, the real American, the immortal Hulk Hogan. And we're going to end this video with a little tribute to my hero and the hero of so many. Thanks for the house.